Hello and welcome. You're watching The Unstoppable Indians on NDTV Profit, a show that is dedicated to ordinary Indians with extraordinary initiative, people who are changing India. This week we come to you from the town of Davos in Switzerland. This is the site of the World Economic Forum annual meeting every year. And today I'm going to introduce you to two social entrepreneurs from India, both of whom have made a huge difference in the fields that they operate in. Vijay Mahajan, chairman of Basics, and Harish Hande, the founder of Selco. A hot cup of masala chai in our hands. Well, it seems unusual here in Davos, but Vijay Mahajan, chairman of Basics, and I decided that's what we need on this cold morning. Vijay Mahajan, thanks very much for joining us here at our NDTV studio in Davos. I have to say, when I heard you were coming, the first question I wanted to ask was, what brings you here? Because, we see the CEOs and the hustle and bustle around them, and the political leaders, and the, various government representatives. A social entrepreneur like yourself, what brings you to Davos?
Well, at a high conceptual level, we represent civil society, and within that a subset of people who are using business-like methods to address social problems. So it fits well in the WEF paradigm. The specific reason is that Professor Klaus Schwab set up a foundation for social entrepreneurs 10 years ago. And over the years, about 160 of us have been identified, and every Davos, about 20 to 30 of us are invited. So this is my third time actually in the last 7 years.
I want to understand exactly how it works. I mean, what does your agenda here include?
Okay, we participate in several ways, apart from, of course, just being able to go to any session that we like. But some of us are assigned roles in panels, and then there are some special interest sessions. For example, I was what's called a fire starter. That's a role in the session yesterday, the lunch session on the value proposition of financial services.
How different are your perspectives? I mean, just draw upon your interaction at that session. When you're looking at it from financial inclusion, and they have, the banker's view of things, is there a big divide? Is there a meeting ground? I'm sure Davos helps to provide or create a meeting ground. But, what is the reality of your views?
Well, one has to prepare. So, for example, I knew that Senator John Sununu was going to be there, and several U.S., financial services CEOs. So I used U.S. data on them. You'd be surprised to know that in the U.S., 55 million adults have no bank accounts, and another 50 million have accounts which are as good as not usable because they have no credit history. So 105 million, which is half of all U.S. adult population, has really no access to financial services. Now, if this is what the most developed financial services sector gave, and I'm talking of pre-meltdown,
right,
then there is not much to be said about it from the point of view of a majority of citizens. So the point I made was that the financial regulators should be held to account by political leaders, not just for the two things that they are normally held accountable, which is, does the financial sector contribute to growth, and does it lead to price stability or not? In addition, they should be held accountable to what percentage of citizens are included in at least basic financial services. Now, the case is so compelling that, they
listen.
They listen, and after the initial aha, there can be a lot of turning of attention to this kind of issues.
You've had so much experience in financial inclusion. What is that one idea or thought or practice or mechanism that you have implemented successfully in India that the rest of the world can learn from and absorb and implement?
Well, there are specific things. For example, I was in a very interesting, by the way, in terms of process methodology, again, there's a lot of variety. One of the sessions is called Workspace, which is a 2.5-hour session. And 5 ideas are presented for 5 minutes each, and then people split into 5 groups in the same space, and you spend half an hour on each idea and so forth. So I was presenting, this workspace was on business solutions to rural poverty, and I was presenting on weather insurance, weather index insurance as an alternative to traditional crop insurance. Now, that's something that Basics had innovated, and indeed we are the global pioneers in that.
What is weather insurance? How does it work?
Well, traditional crop insurance is based on actually cutting crops in sample fields, and there can be a lot of basis risk in terms of, the sample may show that the yield was only 10% down, whereas I as a farmer have had a 30% decline. So it's very unsatisfactory. Whereas in the rainfall-based index or a rainfall plus temperature-based weather index insurance, it's based on the objective numbers, and you get a payout, and you get a payout very quickly, and sometimes quickly enough to actually resow in the same season. So it's been very successfully tried by us in India.
And how many are covered in India?
Well, the traditional insurance is actually mandatory for any farmer who takes a bank loan, so it's 20 million traditional. The new crop insurance, the weather insurance is about 2 million, which is not bad considering it's only about 3 or 4 years in the thing. But it could spread to a much wider number if we had the right policies and so on.
What about reverse osmosis? And I mean, there are representatives from many other emerging markets here. Based on just this visit, is there something that has struck you as particularly worth exploring? It could be Brazil, it could be Africa, it could be any part of the world, but something that has struck you as interesting to try in India.
Sure. I mean, in fact, I just came from a session on land use, and I was on a table where the project that was being discussed was that of reducing deforestation in the Amazon by converting soybean farmers from doing that to growing biomass and then using that to generate electricity. And all of this feeds into what's called the REDD framework of the reducing emissions through deforestation framework. So this is something that I certainly intend to carry back. We already have a company in the Basics group working on climate change issues and carbon credits. Similarly, Kenya, I was in a session on use of mobile telephones for financial services, and the M-Pesa system that is used by Safaricom in Kenya. I knew about it, but I really got to understand its detail yesterday, and I'm very excited to maybe take that.
What's the most striking detail?
Well, the fact that, about 8 million Kenyans are using that now to send money from Nairobi to their, places back home. But there's a striking piece of survey data which 40% of them said that their life would negatively suffer if there was no M-Pesa services. For a service which is just 3 years old, this is amazing, So,
how much headway have we made on that front, just in terms of the use of mobile phones in banking in India?
Well, we've...
And, I'm asking for your perspective, which is, again, the financial inclusion perspective, rather than, say, my perspective.
Sure. So, the getting an SMS from your bank every time you draw money from an ATM, that's
we
universal,
all get it.
Right. But can, say, a Bihari worker working in East Delhi send money to his wife in some village 40 kilometers outside of Muzaffarpur?
That he can't.
Right now he can't. And the only way he can is if he has a bank account and his wife has a bank account, then the current regulatory framework allows bank-to-bank transfers using mobile phones. Recently, less than a month ago, the RBI has now allowed one side bank, one side no bank. So at least the originator has to have a bank account. The recipient need not, as long as she has a proof of identity and so on.
And then how do you disburse at the recipient end?
Okay, so that's where now there has to be a completely new distribution chain. Ideally, and again the RBI has taken a wonderful step of allowing Kirana shops and STD PCOs to become business correspondents of banks. So now the task is really between banks, MFIs, all of us. We need to get our act together. We can't now say there's no policy framework. But this is less than a month ago, so...
Well, Vijay Mahajan, clearly Basics, you and social entrepreneurs have their hands full. Thanks very much for joining us today on NDTV.
Thank you very much for having me.